The changes that we see from those trends, to simplify, when things get going faster and faster as they are, the truth is none of us are keeping up. We all put on a brave front, don't we? I mean, we do. I do. People think I'm very well organized, and most of the time I am. But the truth is I can't keep up either. Nobody can. There are significant breakthroughs ahead, and it's really easy to underestimate those breakthroughs, but they will be significant. Just a little science story the other day that ran on the radio, it was on NPR, was about and I may get some of this wrong because I'm not a techie. It was about an ocean-living water flea. Now somebody says, wait, Glenn, ocean-living water flea has nothing to do with me, right? Well, no, it does have something to do with you. For years they thought this ocean-living water flea was a bloodsucker. And why? Because when they would haul up nets, sometimes this ocean flea would be in the nets and it would be full of blood. And they just assumed it was down the bottom of the ocean sucking blood out of the fish. Wrong. It was manufacturing its own blood because it was so far down in the ocean, it had to manufacture blood in order to have oxygen. But it has the capability within itself to manufacture its own blood in a rapid manner. Rapid manner. It can double and quadruple its blood supply in a matter of minutes. It has a gene that we don't have, and in the scientists that were mapping the genome of that flea, that water flea, have found out it has 25 genes that no other species yet studied has. It has, among other things, the ability to increase its blood platelets and oxygen in its system all by itself. We don't know how yet, but it does it. It doubles and quadruples it when it runs out of oxygen way down in the ocean. Another gene allows it to develop an armor shell instantly so that if it's swallowed by a predator, it will survive the trip through the digestive system of the predator. Now, think about what that gene might do in medicine. You know, if somehow that gene could be studied and figured out so that people could make rapid blood supply when they're losing blood, or that people could have some kind of protective things that happen to them when they get injured. Pretty interesting stuff. Those kinds of scientific discoveries are happening every single day. If you follow science news, as I do, it's amazing how many of those discoveries. I mean, you just, every day it seems like there's a new discovery of something. Either in nanotechnology, the real small stuff, or in space. You know, we've discovered like 150 new planets in the last few years in the solar system. One of the things I do is I read two magazines that I recommend to you. Scientific American's a very old magazine. It's been around for over 100 years. And I find that it's a good general read to keep up with these trends. And I recommend it. I think you should probably get a subscription if you haven't, because you need to keep up with science and technology because they're driving your whole world. Another thing that you might think is very fleeting and fanciful, like a futurist, because the word futurist used to mean storyteller, you know, who could look at a crystal ball. There's a whole science of futuring, which is really interesting, a system for futuring. And the government does it, the federal government does it, private think tanks do it, but the media doesn't cover it very well. The media doesn't cover it very well because there's no sound bites out of it, much. And the media doesn't cover it, and in addition, the specialists in many, many fields don't like to think about the overall trends because that messes up. When they're a specialist in one field, they don't know how to talk about the rest of the field. And it's so complicated that they tend to want to stay in their own field. This kind of combines all of that from many different sources. It's an excellent magazine. And I'll mention a book that is written by the founder of the World Future Society, Edward Cornish. He's a pretty well-known guy. He's been around for 30, 40 years predicting the future. And he's developed an excellent book. This is not fairy science. It's real good stuff. He served on President Reagan's Council on the Future back in the Reagan administration. So he's been around a while, and he's been at the White House, and so he's not just some flake. When people demand more, for those of us who are in business, we have to deliver the products and services on a 24/7, 365 basis now. Our website is up all the time, and even though we get to sleep, some of us wonder about that. Some of us aren't sleeping nearly enough. And those in medicine and psychology know that sleep is a critical thing. And most Americans are in total denial about their chronic stress and sleep. Absolutely total denial. And if I had told you I was going to talk about stress today, half of you probably wouldn't have come. And the reason you wouldn't have come is you would have thought, there's nothing I can do about it, so I don't want to hear about it. You know, you don't understand, Glenn. I have children, I have a business to run, I have a life to lead, my health is failing. Whatever the reasons are, you don't think that you can do anything about the chronic stress you're in. But in fact, you can. And in fact, looking at the steps to predict the future and plan a business and deal with your stress are all the same steps. And in the crisis of my life, what I discovered in the last 2 or 3 years, as I've gone through many, many deep crises in my life, I've discovered that those business planning steps that I knew very well were also stress coping steps and were also trend watching steps. And I'll talk about that probably in another time, but it's in the article anyway. We can't hide our mistakes. Intellectual capital is fleeting. I already mentioned that information is now free. People that had the secret sauce in their business no longer have it because it can be re-engineered now. All I have to do is get a sample of your product and I can usually re-engineer it. The patent, we're going into a world economy. Half of the countries don't respect patents at all anyway. And it's going to be impossible to keep control of good ideas. It's not going to happen. Just ask the leaders of the Middle East. They can't keep control either. And the complexity of everything, this is really getting beyond us here. And that complexity is forcing us all to collaborate instead of compete with each other. Because we have a new enemy now. The enemy is not communism necessarily. The enemy is not some other country. The enemy is the progress we've made that is now eating us alive. That's the enemy. And we have to collaborate to cope with it because we are having and experiencing chronic stress. And I'm glad to see a doctor and a therapist here. Thank you for being here. This is true. The fixes required, and I'm going to go through them quickly, summarizing them here. It seems counterintuitive, but in the world that's going faster, to make good decisions, you actually have to slow down. That's what Bob would tell you. That's what the doctor would tell you. That's what most people that know would tell you, but that's not what you'll do. The tendency is to think, to get more done, I have to work harder. To get more done, I have to have less sleep. To get more done, I have to skip the meal and eat something in fast food lane. That's not true. That actually makes you it counters your productivity. It slows your brain. It handicaps your brain. Your body drags your brain down, and you can't make good decisions. And believe me, this is the time of life that you need to make good decisions because this world is passing by real fast now. And you need to make the best decisions possible. If there ever was a time to start that health regimen that you want to start, this is that time. Don't put it off any longer. Choose lifetime learning. By that I mean really, to simplify it, go read a book. If you haven't read a book lately, rethink that one. I gave up in September 2009, September 2009, I gave up television. Now, believe me, I loved Dancing with the Stars and all those shows as much as anybody did. And I used to work very hard during the day, and I would come home and pour my adult beverage and throw myself in my lazy boy and watch some of those TV programs just to kind of calm down before I went to bed, which it actually didn't calm me down, but I thought it did. And the adult beverage didn't calm me down either, but I thought it did. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I was back up again sometimes, right? Not a good recipe for living life, but it is a recipe a lot of people use, and it was one that I used for many, many years. And lifetime learning is what we have to go opt for. And while everybody else has got this crisis going around you, and they will, that's not going to go away. Your employees are not going to become less demanding. The world's not going to go slower, it's going to go faster. To make better decisions, to be more strategic, you're going to have to slow down. And choose lifetime learning. And that means you've got to make time to learn. Take an extra course in something. Read a book you want to read. Take time off. Think about it. You're going to need to adopt crowdsourcing, and most people still don't know what that means. And I'm using it as a technical term just so you'll kind of get shocked by it. Crowdsourcing is just listening and talking to a lot of other people. It's what every salesman does. That's what we have to do, salesperson. We have to talk to a lot of people. But it's also listening. Crowdsourcing is listening to the people that you are around, that are your customers, that are your vendors, that are your employees, that are your family. And you need to learn it through questioning and listening. And most of us are really pretty bad at that. The next thing we need to do, which is going to shock some of you in the sales world, is drop the elevator pitch. Now I say that provocatively because there are times when you're at a chamber meeting and you got to stand up and introduce yourself at the table, right? Where a little elevator pitch is probably appropriate. But when you are talking to a customer, and I want to use Mike again, when you're talking to a customer, let's take Brian with Coffee News over there. And you're talking, or in your role as a realtor. When you start talking to a buyer or seller in the real estate world, or an potential advertiser in the Coffee News world, you don't start with your elevator pitch. I'll bet you don't. I hope you don't. If you do, you're doing it wrong, Brian. What you need to start with is questions and listening. First of all, you don't want to give your elevator pitch to anybody that you don't know is a potential person that would buy your product or services. So you're absolutely wasting your time to present to people that don't qualify. So, but I'm not talking about just from a qualifying point of view, although that's obviously what you're doing. I'm talking about dropping the elevator pitch and going to a questioning listening campaign so that you take time to listen to what those people are really saying to you. When people want to buy a house or sell a house or advertise in Coffee News, Brian, you are listening to them and you try to be creative in your response. People say, I don't want to do this, I want to do that, I want it to be like this, I don't want it to be like that. That's them wanting more control in their lives. And the best way you can give it to them is to listen, which Bob knows very well, right? Listening is a really critical skill that most people just haven't developed very well. We need, because things are more transparent and you're more accountable, we need to brand with our true stories. Can't get away with fake stories anymore. If your business that you work for is a fake, ultimately, get out of it, go do something else. If you are pretending that you can hide your past, don't worry, everybody makes mistakes. We're all vulnerable with something that's behind us. Go ahead and acknowledge it. Don't worry about it. Be open and honest. That is the recipe that will work in the future. That did not work in the past. It didn't work in the past. It didn't work for a speaker to talk about his divorce. But I know that half of you in this room, by statistically anyway, have gone through or have been close to a divorce. So I know you know what I'm talking about. And I know you know the pain involved. So I don't mind telling you. And I know that most of you don't have some kind of idea that people that get divorced after 32 years are somehow evil. You know, neither one of us had an affair. That wasn't the issue. We just grew apart. It was so painful. But I brand with that story because I'm just a real person. I want you to know that. Invest in the systems and the team. When you can't control the information, make sure that what you're doing with that information in your business and working with the team of employees and colleagues that you have and the vendors, work as a team, work on systems, because that's what makes you unique. If you're in Golden, Colorado, and you have a unique insurance business or a unique business of some kind, that is unique because of you and your team and your systems, not because of the information you're pushing around. That's not unique. And finally, partner up with the best. It is time to collaborate in partnerships, especially for those of us in small business. You never look around at your competitors and think about maybe making them partners. This is the time to do that. That's the kind of response this takes.